Greetings, boils and ghouls. Welcome back to Midnight Movie Massacre. So we still got a couple of shot-on-video double features coming down the pipe for you. I actually got one of those motherfuckers loaded up in the editor right now. It's just about done. Gotta, process it, publish it, and get it out to you. This one, however, is going to be kind of like a spin-off, I guess, because the second movie didn't have fucking subtitles on YouTube. The set that I ordered has not arrived yet, so I can't, compensate for that. And I just gotta roll with it as a single review, which I think is almost kind of destiny, because this movie has a long history for me. It's one that I found out about freshman or sophomore year of high school, so 15, 16 years ago, give or take. And it's one that was always fairly notorious to us. We would watch clips from it on gore and splatter websites back in the day. It's one of the first uber low budget fucking just trash films that I found out about when I was first making the transition from mainstream horror and splatter, I guess you could call it, over to the more low budget stuff. This came about during a time period where the splatteriest thing I'd ever seen was Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead. I think I'd seen Dead Alive by this point, but I'd not really dug into the super low budget stuff, or even just the generally low budget stuff. So this is during that time period where I was finding out about shit like Street Trash, Slime City, things like that, and then I started branching off into the shot on video and underground distributed just trash films, Which brings us to the film we're going to be discussing tonight, which is Violent Shit. Not just in general, that's the actual title of the fucking movie. I'm not certain I ever actually saw this movie in its entirety till I watched it with my girl Jessica last night. I know I'd seen a lot of clips from it, but it felt like one of those things that you didn't need to see the whole movie because it was just a bunch of blood and gore, which for the most part is true. It's violent, and a lot of it is shit. But it's got some substance to it that I think gets overlooked by a lot of people. So we're going to try to touch on that tonight and maybe encourage some of you guys that may have written it off to go ahead and give it a look. I do want to take this opportunity to dedicate this and all of my low-budget horror reviews that I'm going to be doing over the next month or so to David Strege from Inside Movies Galore, Septum Sin from Septum Sin vs. the World, Dustin from Crypt of Horrors, and Philip, aka motherfucking Boris from Croatia up on there, because I think you guys are the dudes that would appreciate this kind of stuff the most, at least in terms of people that I know personally. So without wasting any more time, let's take a look at Violent Shit and start discussing why this movie is still a turd, but maybe not as much of a turd as people make it out to be. Violent Shit was released in 1989 in West Germany. I'm not super up to date on my German history outside of World War II. I think that might have been the bad Germany back then, if the wall was still up, not sure. It was directed, written, and produced by Andreas Schnaus, or Schnaus, again, not German, so I don't know how the fuck to say that properly. Sorry if I butchered that, bud. Not that you'll ever see this shit. It had a budget of roughly 5,000 Deutschmarks, not sure what that means in American money, but I don't think it was very much. And it pretty much reflects in the final product, though I think it rises above that in many areas. It's got all the things you expect from super low budget underground distributed splatter flicks, some really crappy camcorder fades and effects and filters that they put on the shit for no real reason other than that they could. But when you look beyond that kind of stuff and the really low budget splatter effects that are fairly effective considering, there is some good artistic value to this movie, and the plot in itself is kind of interesting. Basic gist of Violent Shit is this little kid is playing ball with himself. He takes too long out in the woods. His mom, who's an abusive cunt, gets mad and locks him in the cellar, where this crazy dick devil demon thing encourages him to kill his mom because he's a weird little pervert who likes watching his mom have sex with people and has murderous fantasies. And so he goes ahead and goes through with this, murders her ass with a tiny adorable little meat cleaver. Flash forward 20 years later, he's part of this group of mental patients that are getting transported around by the police for some reason. Or really, it's just dudes in a van with police stenciled on the side of it. He escapes into the woods and starts murdering people with a very large meat cleaver, and lots of splatter and offensive blood and gore ensues. He pretty much goes around murdering people, just anybody that he crosses paths with for the most part. One consistent thing throughout the movie is he is taking parts that he cuts off of or out of these people, up to including dicks, tits, and livers, intestines, all that kind of stuff, and he's eating it. For some unexplained reason, throughout the entire movie, he has these like sores forming on his face, and he's slowly kind of rotting away, and he just goes about that as he's hobbling around killing motherfuckers. Usually with the meat cleaver, sometimes with a little assistance from some power tools. And that's kind of the movie in a nutshell. The thing about it that makes it stand out to me is the fact that instead of just letting it be nothing but a compilation of these splatter scenes, they actually add a little bit of depth to it with the whole story about him being abused and growing up to, like, you know, meet that abuse out on other people. The whole idea that there's like this dick devil sort of entity in his brain that encourages him to do this stuff. I thought all that was pretty neat, and it pretty much all culminates in this scene where he rips himself apart like fucking dude high on bath salt style, and this baby is born out of his stomach. Now, I'm sorry if that spoils the entire movie for you, but a lot of it's kind of open to interpretation, and I think that's what makes violent shit fun on the side of like all the gore and crazy insanity that goes on within the movie. The dialogue is absolutely hilarious, and it seems to be intentionally written in a way that makes it fucking funny. There's a lot of nuance to this that, you know, is sort of overshadowed by the low budget and overshadowed by the abrasive use of like in-camera camcorder filters and effects. But I think that the movie rises above that in actually having a little bit of character presented within it that they didn't necessarily have to throw in there. Another thing that makes violent shit cool is, as far as I've learned on the internet, it was basically an example of like people subverting the sort of import censorship type stuff that would go on in Germany back then. And honestly, I think up until recent times, they've always had a problem with like not letting people import splatter movies or any violent movies for the most part in general. I think a lot of that is relaxed over the years, but up throughout the 90s and especially through the 80s and stuff, they were not about that. You could literally spend time in jail for importing that stuff. There was a dude who went to jail for importing Cannibal Corpse albums because they had banned the cover art in Germany and stuff like that. So violent shit basically arose as this underground tape-traded splatter movie in answer to that stuff. So in addition to the sort of like awesome subtleties that they packed into the movie that they really didn't need to, there's also the cultural significance part of it, in that it was them going against this sort of oppressive censorship that Germany had to deal with back in the day when it came to film and animation. And music, obviously. Violent shit is basically a gigantic middle finger to that stuff, and I can't help but fucking respect that. Speaking of music, the soundtrack is pretty poppin' as far as like sloppy synth tracks go, but they do also dedicate a whole section of the movie to showcasing The Torture Never Stops off Wasp's self-titled debut album. One of my favorite albums of all time. So get out there, check out Violent Shit, let me know how you interpret that ending, and we are going to let you guys enjoy the live video for The Torture Never Stops, circa 1984, I believe, from London, England. Enjoy. We'll see you back here next time. Snooze, 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 snooze.